seriously popular.
Hello and welcome to Apocalypse Now, dispatches from a world on the brink. In this week's episode, we turn our gaze towards our European cousins as a political earthquake sends shockwaves that are almost certain to end Marine Le Pen's ambitions for the 2027 presidential elections.
If you like this episode, we think you'll love this.
Hi, it's Caroline here from The Trial and The Trial Plus. This week, we've got a special two-part mini-series on celebrities. Caleb Brantley from the US team and I will be exploring how celebrities find themselves in court. We'll be looking to what might happen when Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively face each other in a courtroom. And we'll be looking back to what happened behind the scenes when Johnny Depp and Amber Heard battled it out in court twice. Tune in on Friday this week and please do subscribe by going to thecrimedesk.com.
Hello and welcome to Apocalypse Now, dispatches from a world on the brink, the Daily Mail's weekly global news podcast.
No, she's guilty as hell.
In this sort of case, you should not try to be wiser than destiny.
I mean, to be blunt, she's not intelligent. She doesn't have a great political culture. She's got emotional intelligence. She's got tactical intelligence. She is excellent with people.
The West has three enemies: China, radical Islam, and Putin.
Bordella, he's a TikTok candidate and he's a television candidate.
President Zelensky, for him, the full-scale invasion against Ukraine is not only a local affair, it's a world war.
I'm David Patrikarakos, and I've spent the last 15 years covering foreign affairs and conflict in some of the world's most dangerous places. But even I have to ask, are we now staring into the abyss? In this week's episode, "Head high, clean hands" was once a slogan of the far-right anti-immigration Front National, now renamed the National Rally, to distance itself from what it called the greedy and crooked ways of traditional politicians. But this week, a political earthquake has sent shockwaves that are almost certain to end Marine Le Pen's ambitions for the 2027 presidential election, and throws her far-right party into chaos just as it was setting its sights on taking power in France. The conviction of Le Pen and 24 other party members for embezzlement of European Parliament funds is a huge blow to a far-right party that has long tried to present itself as a squeaky clean alternative to old-school politicians with their hands in the till. Le Pen has been sentenced to 5 years of ineligibility with immediate effect, de facto ruling her out of the 2027 presidential race. The judges also gave Le Pen a sentence of 4 years in prison, with 2 years suspended and the other 2 to be served outside jail with an electronic bracelet and a €100,000 fine. She was found guilty, along with 8 other MEPs, of presiding over a decade-long scheme which prosecutors said diverted funds for MEP salaries to pay for the party's domestic operations. Marine Le Pen's lawyer, Rodolphe Bussolot, has said she will appeal against the court's decision. As for now, she retains her seat as an MP. In the last 48 hours, US President Donald Trump has joined a growing list of populist and far-right leaders, including Hungary's Viktor Orbán, Italy's Matteo Salvini, and the Netherlands' Geert Wilders, offering their support to Le Pen. In a moment, we'll speak to Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, a French journalist, writer and columnist. But first, let us turn to Bernard-Henri Lévy, a big beast of French politics and a noted public intellectual. So, Bernard, let's start with, does the punishment fit the crime? Should Le Pen be banned from standing in the 2027 election?
Nobody said she should be banned. She just has been punished. She and her party and her colleagues, they committed the real financial crime, and they had to be sanctioned for that. That's it. After that, Her party, Rassemblement National, is free to run for office. For her, if there is an appeal and if she is recognized non-guilty in appeal, or for one of her colleagues, Jordan Bardella or whoever, if she is condemned a second time, there is no political ban.
Le Pen has already criticized the French judiciary, hinting that their decision undermines the democratic process, that the establishment is against her. It's a familiar playbook now. We've seen Trump do it many times. Does her complaint have merit? And more importantly, with Trump, it made him a martyr. It helped push him to the presidency. Do you see a similar danger for her party now?
It could help, of course. It could have counter effect. I don't know that. And in this sort of case, you should not try to be wiser than destiny, predict what will happen if in 2 years, etc. No, for the moment, you have a crime which has been committed, money for European Union who has been used to pay bodyguards of Jean-Marie Le Pen or to pay the sister of Mrs. Le Pen. This has to be sanctioned, period. What happens after? We'll see. There are so many parameters. It should not be part of the discussion. In a democracy, there are two sacred principles. Number one, the will of the people. And number two, le droit, the right, the law of law. If one of the two pillars fail, democracy is over. You cannot have law without people, and you cannot have people without law. You have to have a balance between the two. And my goodness, in France, for the moment, the balance seems respected as much as it can.
On a broader point, the consensus seems to be that the far-right, populists, perhaps even autocrats are on the rise across Europe and the world. From a philosophical point of view, what do you think is the reason for this? Is it migration, disillusionment, a population that feels constantly under attack?
I don't think it is migration. This is the narrative of the extreme right to say that, but I don't think so. No, I think we are living in Europe the third big crisis of democratic and liberal values in 1 century, more than 1 century. The first one was at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, time of Dreyfus affair. People no longer believed in democratic and liberal values. They said, okay, they were great values, but they are just dying. They are just old. Second period, the 30s, end of the 20s, 30s of the 20th century. Again, people were not necessarily against democracy. They just thought it's an old idea. It's not working any longer. We have to turn the page. And then there was a disaster of Nazism, and people recollected their minds. But we are living the third crisis of the same sort. Are democratic values still worth being defended? Are liberal values really embettering the life of the people and so on? Again, people are asking this question. Maybe people are asking for the third time. Maybe liberal values are too heavy to defend. Maybe it's too much a burden of the shoulders of the people. Maybe we should just feed the beast and that's all, and the games and so on, and football. In the third moment of that. And the people of Europe will have to make proper evaluation. Do they really want to feed the beast with no liberty? Or do they want to take a little risk, the risk of liberty, and to have human rights, to have democracy? It will be a choice. We are in front of a choice for the third time in the contemporary history. And it is a historical moment.
You have made it your life's work to oppose these kinds of people, autocrats, dictators. We are both in Washington, D.C., where we see one populist, Donald Trump, very much in control, and perhaps now even exhibiting autocratic tendencies. How concerned are you about events here in D.C.?
We'll see. Of course, I'm concerned. I'm concerned, for example, about Ukraine, about Russia. For me, the West has two enemies today. three enemies: China, radical Islam, and Putin. The real question which has to be addressed to the leaders of the West, and first of all to Donald Trump, is: are you willing, are you able, are you ready to confront the three at the same time? Are you ready to consider that it is a life and death issue for the West to fight against the three? In other words, is America still willing to be the leader of the free world or not? There are signs, bad signs, which indicate that the new administration is tempted to abandon, to quit this role of leadership of the free world. It will be a disaster. I love America. It will be a disaster. Maybe the new administration will go the other side. We'll see that very soon. In the next days, we'll see. On the case of Ukraine, what is the real trend here? We'll see. But as I'm an optimist, I'm not a dogmatic. For myself, for my children, for my country, for Europe, I wish with all my force that it works. And the test will be Ukraine. Ukraine is the test.
But you're in a position, with the unique access you hold in so many ways, to understand the effects of Trump personally. Now, I believe you met with Zelensky about just 48 hours before that Oval Office, terrible Oval Office interview. Can you tell us what he was like there as he was going off to meet the president?
What was strange and what I did not understand on the spot is that he was still hesitating to go. He was not completely decided. There was this agreement about minerals which was still on discussion, and I saw him hesitate. It was part of our conversation in Kiev. Finally, he went, and finally happened what you saw, what I saw. I was in Ukraine when it happened. I was with soldiers, by the way, on front line in Pokrovsk, and we saw that live, and it was a very strange moment to see that in this condition. But President Zelensky, he defends his country, he defends Europe, and he defends the West. He's a defender of the West. He's a supporter of the West beyond his Ukrainian patriotism. He really believes that he has on the shoulders of his commanders the fate of the West. This is the way he sees himself. For him, the full-scale invasion against Ukraine is not only a local affair, it's a world war. And he's on the front line of this war. So the question he was asking this day when we met just before he took off for Washington was, does America understand that? Does the world understand what we are fighting for, we Ukrainians?
I just want to stick with this theme for a bit more. I was recently in Serbia, where protesters are taking to the streets against their president Vučić, that many see as pro-Kremlin. I was also recently in Georgia, as protesters rose up against their pro-Kremlin leadership. Now we see hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets to protest Erdogan. We are seeing a rise of dictators, autocrats that I think maybe feel emboldened by Donald Trump. But are we also seeing a pushback from the people? And where does this leave the West?
You know, a lot of crazy people speak about the clash of civilizations. Since Huntington, Samuel Huntington, there is this topic in the global discussion, clash of civilization. There is the reality that there is one clash of civilization. There is one. It is the one you are mentioning. Autocracy versus democracy. Clash of civilization inside Turkey between the demonstrators in the streets and Erdogan. Clash of civilization in Russia between Putin and the inheritors of Navalny. Clash of civilization in Europe between those who still believe in the liberal values and those who believe in an illiberal democracy. And it is a real clash. It is a real battle. It is a real war of ideas. Who will win this war? Who will prevail? Will liberal prevail or illiberal prevail? Question mark at this moment. That's why a few of us and the peoples have a role to play. We have to push for the victory. We have to wish and push for the victory of liberal values. Game is not over. Mr. Erdogan has not won. Putin is not there forever. The radical Islam can be pushed back. Has China the power to speak to the whole world? It's not sure at all. So China can be contained. We'll see. It depends really on the people. It depends really on those who contribute to make opinion. The battle is raging at this very moment.
So when we think about the fight back, let's talk about your own country, France. You spent a lifetime at the heart of French politics. You have worked with and corresponded with many, many French presidents, up to this day with Macron. How are you hopeful for France's future? Obviously, there are a lot of internal problems. And what is France's place in the Europe that needs to be reformed right now?
At this moment, thanks to President Macron, or maybe also thanks to the global vacuum, I don't know, France is exerting the leadership of Europe, moral leadership and military leadership, because we are a nuclear power. France is acting as a leader, and Macron is acting himself as a leader. I saw him a few days ago in Paris with President Zelensky. I had the feeling to have in front of me two leaders of the free world, different type, different sort, two European leaders of the free world. That for me is clear. And I don't say that by patriotic bragging. I don't care. I care about Europe. I care about freedom. It can be France who takes leadership or UK. For me, it's not the problem. But France, we have definitely a problem, which is the two populists. The one we spoke at the beginning of our conversation, the right-wing populism, which is still and more than ever a problem for the democracy. And we have the left-wing populism, which is terrible too. A lot of them are vehiculating, are putting into circulation the worst cliché, the worst commonplaces, the worst words of the old anti-Semitism, though disguised under anti-Zionism. And this is France. And this party, left-wing party, is an important one. He even devoured part of the traditional left. And this is a problem. So if you ask me about the crisis in France, I would say the two wings of the populism, this is the root of the French evil.
And is Macron now, as he heads towards the door, is his now role finished? Can he still keep France together, or is that job now going to fall to somebody else even before his term is over?
Macron is still there for 2 years. 2 years is long. 2 years is long enough to fix a certain number of problems. And 2 years is enough to build a legacy and a follow-up, an heritage. Who will come after? We have 2 years. And I believe more than ever, we have a lot of people in France who can trace, who can design a road which is neither Le Pen nor Mélenchon. France is not due to make this devilish choice. Far from it.
So you have seen so much in your career, and you have seen so much human suffering, so much war. But as you said to me earlier, you are optimistic. Please tell me about the importance of hope, of being a hopeful man or woman in this time, and what does it give us in this struggle that we are talking about?
See the example of Ukraine. Ukraine could have resigned, could have despaired on February 24. They could have said, okay, game is over. One of the most powerful army in the world is invading us. We have to bow the neck and to wait. They did the opposite. With no experience of war at that time, with no real help from the rest of the world, they stood up, they resisted, and look at them. 3 years after, they are still there. Russia do not advance. They even led some counteroffensives who were successful in Black Sea, in Kherson, and in other places. You have here the proof that when women and men, individuals and the people collectively decides not to bow, they can do it. Ukraine, when people decide to be optimistic, decides not to quit, they can. And they did. And Ukraine are still there. And believe me, they will be there tomorrow more and more. So proof by Ukraine that optimism can be right and is often right.
Bernard-Henri Lévy, thank you. When we come back, we'll head to Paris to speak to journalist, writer and columnist Anne-Elisabeth Moutet to get her thoughts on the outcome of the Le Pen case. Stay with us.
If you like this episode, we think you'll love this.
Hi, it's Caroline here from The Trial and The Trial Plus. This week, we've got a special two-part mini-series on celebrities. Caleb Brantley from the US team and I will be exploring how celebrities find themselves in court. We'll be looking to what might happen when Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively face each other in a courtroom. And we'll be looking back to what happened behind the scenes when Johnny Depp and Amber Heard battled it out in court twice. Tune in on Friday this week and please do subscribe by going to thecrimedesk.com.
Welcome back to Apocalypse Now, dispatches from a world on the brink. Anne-Elisabeth Moutet is a journalist and columnist based in Paris who has been watching and writing about the machinations of French politics for years, and she joins me now. There are a few things we talked about with our guest on this episode, Bernard-Henri Lévy, that I'd like to go over with you. Were you surprised by the gravity of the sentence for Le Pen?
I wasn't surprised because we knew that would be the sentence, because she's been much more guilty than, for instance, the current Prime Minister, François Bayrou, who got off lightly. In the extent of it, she had almost 30 members of her party drawing fictitious salaries for work they were not doing. I mean, the salaries actually were not fictitious. And also because she's never acknowledged that it was a mistake, except that she has repaid the European Parliament, which must mean something. So her attitude has not helped her. And the extent for this for years and years, and for an amount which is about 10 times what the Bayrou's small centrist party did, with people who worked half for the European Parliament, whereas her people did not work at all for the European Parliament. All of this was sort of made it fairly logical that the sentence would be a severe sentence. The one thing that's being discussed in France right now is the fact that she is prevented from running for president, even though she is appealing. And you'd think that legal principles mean that if you appeal, you're considered innocent again until you're judged again. And nobody has any kind of doubt that she will be judged guilty again.
Okay, can you explain to our listeners why she still retains her seat as an MP? She'd lose the whip here almost instantly.
Actually, what's really strange is there's a kind of immunity for parliamentarians in France, which is different from candidates or party leaders. And she will remain in the National Assembly until the next election, which could be a snap election, Emmanuel Macron can call about any time, but in which case she will not be allowed to run again. But right now she's protected, just as if she were elected president, i.e. if they don't manage to bring the appeal in time for the election, and if she weren't prevented from running, that's two big ifs. If she were elected before the appeal was judged, they changed the decision so that she is allowed to run, then she is safe for 5 years because she would have presidential immunity. I know it sounds bizarre, but that's the way it works.
So, Anne, do you think she has a chance on appeal?
No, she's guilty as hell. There are emails from various of her Euro MPs and assistants, supposed assistants, like from her sister, for instance, that say, well, I haven't been to Strasbourg at all, and perhaps I should go and meet the people there. And these are people who've been paying her a salary for months. So it is very obvious that it was completely fraudulent, and they knew it.
Let's talk about another sort of appeal. Why is she so popular with some sectors of French voters?
First of all, the National Rally is popular because there's a feeling that France is right now, the government is not efficient enough. There are the usual problems that people worry about, which is a cost of living, but also security, the fact that there's crime in the streets and the police seems to be not doing enough about it. There's the question of immigration. The British will not believe this, but the French do not like the idea of small boats starting from here or coming here because we've got a southern seaboard any more than the British do. So there are many cases in which people say we want something strong. I mean, she doesn't say many things that are more dangerous than Nigel Farage. And you can see that he's very popular, that, there's a logic to this. The one thing about Marine Le Pen and her party in general is they're aping conservative parties, radical conservative parties that you see in Europe. But the song inside is much more French because they don't read English, they don't read other languages, they don't look for ideas internationally. People say they are part of this new populist international, but they like the idea, but they've no idea what it is really.
In a recent column, you wrote that Le Pen knew perfectly well that the judges were unlikely to feel lenient towards her and her ring-fenced party. What did you mean by that?
The National Rally polled the most, a plurality of the votes in the snap election that Emmanuel Macron called almost a year ago in last June, after his party lost the European election. He didn't have to, he did, it was stupid. And they polled 11 million votes. The Macronista party did 6 million and the left did 7 and something million. In Britain, that would get her a majority in the House, a comfortable like one. She was polling more than Keir Starmer in the last election in Britain. The system in France is a bit different, and also people said this is the National Rally, we must not vote for it, there must be a Republican front against it. And people in the Macron party voted for left-wingers when they had the best chance of being elected. People on the left voted for Macronistas, which helped Macron have more votes than he would have had otherwise. And the result was that essentially the National Assembly, after the second round, we have 2 rounds, was cut in 3/3. And the 3/3 are almost equal. The largest group was the left, but the National Rally, made of a single party, had 100-something MPs. So essentially you had 3/3, and that's almost impossible to navigate because it's very difficult to get each group to ally themselves with the others again. They all feel that they've been actually traduced by the system, and it's something that will never work again.
Well, given that, like so many rightist populist parties, they've stood in opposition to corrupt elites, how damaging is it that she's now revealed to be one of them with her snout in the trough just like everybody else?
There's one thing in France, which is that if you embezzle money for your party as opposed to personal gain, there's a tolerance for that, and there are reasons for this. And one of those reasons is the fact that the French have never dared increase the amount that was allowed for individual contributions to the party. In 1988, so that's a long time ago, the first bill of a number of increasingly irrelevant bills on party finance was voted, and it forbade any businesses or corporations to pay for parties, and individuals were limited to, the sum was in francs at the time, the equivalent of £7,000 per person. You can have 2 in a household and that's it. And that sum has not changed in 37 years, which means that parties are underfunded. It's very difficult for them to find the ways to finance themselves. The saying goes in Paris, and I cannot sort of affirm it, that any candidate who goes and campaigns abroad, whether it's in Lebanon or in London or somewhere else, manages to meet people who are very happy to contribute more than that. And so far, this is not something that has been sort of taken up by the judges. One day it will, and presumably everybody will be found guilty. It's hypocrisy. No National Assembly wants to vote more money for politicians. It's been the same thing with MP salaries when you had the expenses scandal in Britain. It looks bad to give money to political parties, which are deeply unpopular, and it ends up with this incredibly inefficient system.
So, given all of this, is there a chance that this sentence will, even if she's guilty, it will help make her a martyr in her followers' eyes, as it did Trump, who was also guilty when he was convicted in the US?
There is, and they're playing it for all it's worth, and it's working because essentially it looks like she's been singled out, and it looks like people have been deprived from the right to pick their candidate. And there's a phrase in constitutional law that says that you cannot deprive the voters from choosing whoever they want to vote to, which meant that there were possibilities of changing this ruling. But Emmanuel Macron has spoken at the cabinet meeting on Tuesday, saying that he respected the judges and that everyone should respect the law, which was widely interpreted by his saying essentially that Marine Le Pen had to sort of, take it.
Her party's president, Bardella, vowed that if he won the presidency, he'd immediately pick Marine as his PM. How likely is this scenario, given you say that she's not going to win on appeal?
He can. He can. It would be interesting, but he could. The question is, will he feel like it 2 years from now, if he's the one running? And he will probably do well unless, things beyond our capacity to predict happen. But she's got a very different personal equation from he does. Everybody in the party is used to her. She's familiar. They find her very human, very unlike technocrats. They like that. They find her motherly in some ways. I've interviewed her a couple of times. She's an extremely nice woman, if you think what you want of her ideas. But essentially, there's a warmth to her, which means that she's managed to get elected with very good scores in that working class constituency in northern France, which used to vote for the Communist Party 30 years ago. So she brings something, and she brings something which is important because older people like her, and they are the ones who go to the polls. Young people say lots of things and they end up not voting. But who knows how it will be. It's certainly legal for the president to pick whoever he wants as prime minister, and you don't need to be in the cabinet to be a minister in France.
So it's interesting you say this. You say she's motherly, she's warm. I mean, Bardella is a young technocrat. Given that you can't think of the hard right in France without a Le Pen over the last 60 years, is there anyone waiting in the wings who will fill that Le Pen-shaped void if she does go?
Bardella is not a technocrat. He dropped out of university. He is extremely clever, extremely fast, hardworking, reads all the notes that he's given. He doesn't read books, really. That's not his thing. But he's a TikTok candidate and he's a television candidate. And you have to admire the fact that he's incredibly articulate at 29 and he will be running at 31. And that's very impressive. Who fulfills the person of Marine? That's difficult and interesting because the French have never prized people who happen to be human. It's just that she's the daughter of her father and he had no sons. And the National Rally is a National Front who are family concerns. So that's entirely different. But it's not something that we were used to asking for, but the Rally is a different party. And it's like in many other countries, it's the party of people who spoke with the people who have no voice. And she's believable. And Bardella comes from the banlieue, the projects. He comes from a place where he says, look, I'm the grandson of immigrants and son of immigrants, Italian. There's one Algerian grandmother. And the whole thing sort of says, okay, he speaks for us. But it's not something that has been a prerequisite in French politics.
Can you run a nuclear power at 31?
I don't know. I mean, Macron was elected at 37. He was a technocrat, and that was supposed to be insurance that he knew.
Okay, let's talk about the general trend of this. In one sense, Le Pen is just part of a broader trend across Europe and indeed America of strongmen autocrats. Do you see in her a worrying trend that is dangerous for Europe?
Yes, I think she's been more moderate because she felt that she needed to detoxify her party, which was tainted by the fact that her father's friends were collaborationists. Her father made horrible anti-Semitic jokes about the Holocaust, stuff like that. She may at one stage decide that the detoxifying has gone far enough and it hasn't helped her now. I mean, to be blunt, she's not intelligent. She doesn't have a great political culture. She's got emotional intelligence. She's got tactical intelligence. She is excellent with people. But I don't think there's any kind of complexity. And even the technocrats, they have their pet énarques, the graduates of the equivalent of Oxbridge. They have that in the party. But they're not very well organized. So I don't think Bardella is any better than she is at running the country, to be entirely frank. I mean, take somebody like Viktor Orban, who's broadly the same family of ideas. This is a man who's very intelligent, who spends, one day a week reading books, who invites intellectuals to talk with him, who of course speaks several languages because nobody except Hungarians speaks Hungarian. And all of this means that you've got somebody who thinks about what he's doing, and whether you disagree or not, that's somebody with a kind of intellectual stature. And if you look at somebody like Giorgia Meloni, who's different, this is also somebody who sort of works hard and reads books and is interested in ideology. And the National Rally uses familiar tropes in the French right, looking very often backwards. There's no feeling of modernity. This is what we've got. This is what we've got to deal for, but it's a bit disheartening.
Thanks to my guests today, Bernard-Henri Lévy and Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, and to you for listening. Join me, David Patrikarakos, next time as we continue to bring you dispatches from a world on the brink. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, TikTok and Instagram at Apocalypse Now Pod, and you can get in touch via email at apocalypsenow@dailymail.com. We'll see you again next week as we ask once again, Apocalypse Now?
If you like this episode, we think you'll love this.
Hi, it's Caroline here from The Trial and The Trial Plus. This week, we've got a special 2-part mini-series on celebrities. Caleb Brantley from the US team and I will be exploring how celebrities find themselves in court. We'll be looking to what might happen when Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively face each other in a courtroom. And we'll be looking back to what happened behind the scenes when Johnny Depp and Amber Heard battled it out in court twice. Tune in on Friday this week and please do subscribe by going to thecrimedesk.com.